Welcome to Clubhouse with a tutorial on how to pick a good hobby knife for making model kits and how to use them effectively. As with my other tutorial videos, this guide is meant to help fans who are newer to the hobby and less familiar with the many choices of tools to buy. So if you're very experienced and you're already very awesome, you may already know a lot of what I'm about to say. Okay then, let's get going. Now if we count the first tool you should buy for building a model, that's gonna be your pair of side cutters. But right after that, the second tool really ought to be a good knife. In fact, a knife's job is to make cuts clean and beautiful, so much so that you can work with the worst of cutters and you can still get a very cleanly cut piece as long as you have a good knife. Or if you know how to handle one, that's not so ideal. So to me at least, the knife is a very important tool, and that's why I've always wanted to make this video for a long time. For this video, we'll be looking at mainly three types of knives that most people will likely come across when they build models. The first is the very common box cutter. The advantage of this is it's very likely that you already have one at home, so there's no cost in getting one and there's no risk in case you really don't like building models. The second one is the precision craft knife, here which people commonly call X-Acto knives because of a popular brand, or just hobby knives. And this is likely what people will first encounter or be recommended when first building models. These are big improvements over box cutters, and we're going to be looking at why they're such good tools. But lastly, we have a close relative of that knife, a small craft knife handle with the clamp style collet. And I'll tell you exactly what's so special about these when we get to it, but first let's have a close look at each of these knives in order. The box cutter is a really common tool and probably you have one at home. If you're lucky, you'll have a small one like mine here made by Ulfa. But if you're not so lucky, you may have a really chunky one like one of these. Box cutters are good because their blades are really sharp, and that's why you've been warned, I'm sure, to be really careful whenever you use them, and you really should. But they also have other qualities too, like how they're great for long swiping cuts that make full use of your wrist. And the bigger, thicker blades are really sturdy and they can take a lot of abuse. Problem is, the wrist movement and the durability are quite irrelevant to us when we're building a model. Not only that, but the stocky handle is actually a detriment because they're designed to be gripped in the heart of your palm. And they don't work very well with a pen grip with your fingers, but yet we really need to use our fingers here. Then there's the rattling blade. All box cutter blades slide around a little bit in the shell and they aren't fixed in place. And you can imagine this being quite annoying when you want to make a cut but the blade might shift a little bit before the actual cutting happens. So overall, these aren't very suitable for us for model building. They're made for bigger cuts that don't call for a lot of detail or control, and so if possible, really don't use these. But what if we don't have a choice and really this is all we have? Well, let's see if we can work with that. Remember, if you know the purpose of a tool and you also know the shortcoming of the tool you have at hand, you can often find ways to compensate. So first of all, you want to grip your knife in your knuckles rather than in your palm. This gives us something close to a pen grip, and I'll tell you why this is important after the next part. For the moving blade, we want to press our thumb onto the top of the blade's body to hold it down. The corner will be a little bit uncomfortable and it's going to poke at your thumb a little bit, but that's a trade-off we have to accept when we have to make the best use of the tools that really aren't that ideal. Now for the cutting motion, our thumb plays its second major role. We want to push the blade and control it mainly with our thumb. The knuckles can help a lot too for smooth control of the blade, and you'll be able to manage smooth, controlled slices. And now is a really good time to remind you of some points for caution when using any kind of knife. First of all, you never ever use your wrist's strength to push the blade. The knife should be controlled by your fingers, and that should be enough when you're building a model. If there's something you cannot easily cut through with just a push of your fingers, then you must stop and check if the blade is chipped or really dulled, or if the material you're trying to cut is too thick. If you want to cut something that's quite thick, then you want to change over to a sawing motion instead. If you force the blade with enough strength of your wrist, the material may suddenly give way, or the blade might slip and jump and your hand will make a very wide and unpredictable swipe forward, which can very possibly give you a nasty cut. So really, remember, no wrists, only fingers. Second, always cut away from yourself. I've seen people on YouTube not aware of this when teaching people how to use hobby knives, or even specifically telling people to cut towards yourself, and that's horrible. All knives, hobby or not, should never cut towards you, period. That's for your safety, even if it's not likely that you're gonna stab yourself. It is a rule you must make into your second nature. And number 3, make sure to wear eye protection. Normal glasses are good enough, but if you don't wear glasses, at least pick up a pair of protective visors or, wear some swimming goggles or something, even though they're kind of hard to see through, because bits of plastic can fly up, and trust me, they're pretty nasty if you get them in your eyes. Or even worse, the tip of a blade can snap and you really don't want that hitting your eyeball. So keep those 3 rules in mind always, okay? Alright, let's move on. Next up, let's look at the common craft knife, which is the automatic recommendation for most modelers if you ask them for tool advice. The first notable advantage of these is that they have handles that are shaped like pens because they expect to be handled with a pen grip or a knuckle grip that we learned just before. And immediately you'll notice its shape lends itself very nicely to be controlled with our fingers, and you're going to feel much more confident that the blade is in your control. The second advantage are the blades themselves. Craft knife blades have steep angles that are very good for detailed work, and they're a big cut above the long, unwieldy blade of the box cutter. You'll have more control with your fingers, and the knife will therefore be a whole lot safer. And thirdly, these knives use a collet at the top to clamp down on the blade that fixes them firmly in place, and this is absolutely something we want. And then this collet also allows for a wide variety of blades, from this flat top push blade, or even a saw. So this can transform your knife into a wide range of tools by purchasing additional blades. But they do come with a bit of drawbacks. First of all, the blades cost a little bit more. Box cutters are cheap even if they're not a good fit as a tool for us, and sometimes cost really is a limiting factor. Hobby knife blades are good for maybe 3 to 4 kits before they become a little bit dull and they lose their clean bite. And the more dull they become, the more dangerous they are to use. And secondly, I don't think you're gonna hear this from too many YouTubers, these blades are too big. What, you might say, but these blades are already very compact and they're meant to do delicate work, right? Like cutting beautiful paper patterns. And you're right as always. But look at this. This is a common nub left from a gate, and look at this cut. We're really only using a small fraction of the entire cutting surface. Small as the blade is, this is still way too much blade, much more than we'll ever need for making models. And if you've only used one of these knives for many years like I previously did, you may not realize that this affects our control of the blade by a whole lot. This needless extra blade is why I have my next suggestion. So rather than using a common size craft knife, we want to instead use this smaller one. Now there's no specific name for these, but I like to call them Japanese craft knives because mainly NT Cutter and Alpha makes them, and they're both Japanese companies. The one I have here is the NT Cutter D400GP standard craft knife. Amazon sells these, so you should have no trouble buying them, but they're really not that common in craft stores for some reason, and not many American manufacturers make knives at this size. So what's so special about this? Basically, it boils down to the different collet. Rather than the side-to-side collet of the bigger knife, the D400GP has a clamp especially made to hold these smaller blades. Now, if you really don't want to buy another knife handle, the big knife can hold these smaller blades well enough, but they're kind of hard to install because they slide around inside the collet when you fasten it, and there's a chance the blade will slip inside if you don't tighten it enough. And the D400GP will not have that problem. And as a quick tangent, these smaller blades come in 2 types. This one that we've been looking at here is called the 40-degree blade, and then this other one is called the 45-degree blade, and you really don't want the 45 degrees one because they're way too shallow like this for our use. Then you might say, well, big deal, it's just a smaller blade, right? How is that going to be any different? Well, to go back to what I mentioned earlier, it all comes down to control. You have to use and feel both types of knives, but if you've already used the big ones with years of experience behind you, it will shock you how absolute of a control your fingers will have over the short blade. Rather than always relying on the push of a blade, this short blade will encourage you to slice with a sliding motion, which is not only safer, but you can remove thin layers of material with shocking accuracy. Whether it's rolling the blade as you cut along a surface with your pen grip, or you paring down a surface with your knuckle grip, the knife will cut exactly as much as you want. And just try it and you'll be astonished. There is a reason you see these smaller knives in Japanese modeling guides. But as if that wasn't enough, these even have a secret hack. So let's say you're fresh out of new blades and then you go to Amazon to get more and oh no, they're out of stock. But you only have a precious few days off and they're gonna be wasted at this rate. What to do? Well, let's bring in our friend from earlier, the thin box cutter. And maybe you know where this is going. So this 30-degree blade I have installed here is exactly the same as the one segment of this box cutter blade. Yep, just snap one right off and you're off to the races. And this really isn't some kind of mistake. Japanese manufacturers like NT Cutter and Alpha makes these blades to the same specifications and they use the same machines. They're quite literally the same thing, but they're just sold in a long row or as individual blades. There's just no real drawbacks to these small Japanese craft knives. And to wrap things up, remember at the start how I said being able to handle a knife is enough to compensate for even the worst of cutters? Well, let's put that to the test. Let's say you're stuck at grandma's place and you want to build a model kit that you brought along, but the only tools you can commandeer is a nail clipper and some box cutters. Surely you'd agree that the nail clippers are far from a suitable tool here, and let's just put that to the test. So here's my nail clipper and the ugly cut it makes off the runner. It's not really that clean, but I'm sure you've caught on by now that we're still in good hands because we know how to use the box cutters to finish the job. With the knuckle grip, we can slide the blade to remove most of the remaining gate little by little by little. Then by using the blade to pare down the nub, we get a beautiful flat finish. So that's why the knife is such an important part in your tool set. And as a side note, I bet you recognize this pointy thing that I use in all my reviews. And this is actually more than just a needle for drawing panel lines. This is in fact the NT Cutter DS, and it's actually one of those smaller knives. Yes, there's a collet on top and it accepts one of those small blades. But really this is more of a curiosity and I really do use it for the needle. The smaller body sadly doesn't make it a better knife. Oh, and one last thing. Disposed blades can be very dangerous to you when you throw out the trash, or for anyone who has to handle it from that point forward, or even to animals if it winds up in the ocean or in an exposed landfill. So we want to do this in a responsible way. The best way is if you have a disposal container like the one I have right here, but if you don't, just save a bottle when you're done drinking some Coke and just chuck them in there. One bottle should last you a lifetime of blades. Or just use any other old container that won't easily spill. The point here is to throw the entire container away someday rather than the loose blades one by one. Deal? So that's the tutorial on different knives for model building. Remember that the best knife is the one that you have full control of in your hand, and hopefully you've not only learned about which knives are better, but you are now able to use any knife, good or bad, to put together a model kit like a pro. Thank you so much for watching. Come look us up on social media with updates on upcoming videos and sneak peeks at future projects, links are in the description below. Or hang out here some more with one of these other videos. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos from Hobby Clubhouse, and I'll see you next time.